So for this video, we are going to talk about Excel functions. We're going to talk about cell referencing, and we're going to talk about typing in literals. First, let's put some data down in the spreadsheet. I'm going to label a column. I'm just going to call that column data. And I'm just making this data up for the purposes of this video. I'm going to make this all nice and pretty with that label there. So now I'm just going to type in some numbers. Okay, so here I have a bunch of numbers typed in. And let's say I want to do stuff with these numbers. For example, let's just say I wanted to add them all up. Well, one way of doing that is to just type in the numbers starting with an equal sign and then plus the next number and plus the next number. This is not a good way of doing it because we might want to do other things with these same numbers. And if I just typed it in with plus signs, then I would have to type in all the numbers again with maybe minus signs or multiplication signs or whatever it is. Let me just show you. I can say equals 24.3 and then plus, that's not plus, plus 36.9 and so on and so on and so on. And when I press enter, it would end up adding up all the numbers that I type in. When we do that, we're talking about, or we call that typing in a literal. And you very rarely want to type in a literal number when you're working with functions, unless that number is just part of the function. For example, you might want to add up everything and divide by 2. Well, that would be just that number 2, just an arbitrary number, would be part of the function. So instead of doing that, if I want to find the addition of all of these, I could type in equals, and then here we have cell B2, so I could type in B2 plus B3 plus B4, and I could keep doing that, but that also is not such a good way of doing it because we're not really taking full advantage of a spreadsheet and what a spreadsheet can actually do. Let's try one other thing. Well, we're going to actually try two other things. But the first thing that we're going to try is just referencing the cell by clicking on the cell. So let me just show you. We would have an equal sign, because that's how all functions start out. And then I could click on the cell, the first one. There we go. Oh, and then plus, I could click on the second one, plus this 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 one, and then enter, and then it would add up all these numbers. Now that's still not the best way of doing it because we have a spreadsheet function that will add up everything in a column. And this is not a good way for more than one reason. If I had, say, 100 data values or more, I would have to keep clicking on each cell and so on and so on. It's a good thing, however, that Excel recognizes what we call a range of functions. So, and again, this is not the best way of doing this, but this is a way of doing this that's better than all the other ones that we've tried. I could use a function that's built into Excel called sum, S-U-M, and that means to add everything. So I'm going to say equals, and then sum. And you can see that the word sum shows up. I'm going to double click on that. And now what I'm going to type in is the first cell, which is B2. So B2. And then I'm going to type a colon. Now, when we type in the cell reference, colon, what Excel will expect from there is a range of cell values. So we're just going to go from the first value and we're going to go straight down to the last one, which is in cell B9. So B9. And on Windows systems, you have to close the parenthesis. I believe in the fake computer systems like Apple's, you don't have to close the parenthesis. So I'm going to close the parenthesis, and then I'm going to press Enter, and that will add up everything in the range from cell B2 to C9. We have a much better way of doing even that. One of the best uses of spreadsheets, or one of the best purposes of using a spreadsheet, is because you want to expedite everything. You want everything to, work, and you want to be able to do it quickly. Unlike a calculator, where each time you did things on the calculator, you would have to retype in the numbers. So I'm going to get rid of this. Just clicked on the cell. I'm going to press delete. Everything disappears. And now I'm going to type in equals. The word we use to add up a range of numbers would be sum. And then, let's see, I'm going to open parenthesis. Now I'm going to click on the very first number. I'm going to hold the mouse button down. And while I'm holding it down, I'm going to go to the last one. So now what we have is the sum of B2 colon B9. It automatically fills it in for you. And then I'm going to close that parenthesis, and I'm going to press Enter, and of course it works out to be that same number, 202. So far what we've learned is about typing in a literal and how it's not commonly used to just type in the actual literal number. Then how to type it in as cell references, but that also isn't necessarily the best way. The next thing was to work with a range of values by clicking on the first one, holding the mouse button down, and dragging to the last one. Let's say I wanted to do something else. Let's say I wanted to find the average of these numbers. Well, I already found the sum, which is 202. And then I could go, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 values. So I can just say equals 202 divided by, and I didn't type in 202, I clicked on the cell with 202 in it, divided by the 8 values. Now that comes out to be 25.25. That's all fine and dandy, but on tests and homework assignments and practice tests, I'm going to give you different length data sets. So you would have to count out how many of each you have. So this brings us to our next spreadsheet function, which will make things much easier for us, because it will automatically calculate how many values are in the range of numbers. I'm going to type in the equal sign, and you all know that the word average is what we use when we add up a bunch of numbers and divide by the total number of numbers that we have. So I start out with that equal sign. I'm going to type in the word average. And if you look right here, we have that first average. So I'm going to click on that. and it automatically will open that parenthesis for me. I sometimes type in the whole word and I sometimes double click on it. It just depends. And then I'm going to grab the first one, and I'm going to go to the last one, and then I'm going to close the parenthesis and press enter, and you'll see it does all the work for me. Okay, so I'm going to type in another data set. Actually, I've already typed in another data set that I just called data 2. And it has the same number of data values as data 1. What I'm going to talk about now is something that we call dynamic cell referencing. Let's just say I give you instructions and I want you to multiply every value from the first data set to every value of the second data set that's in the same row. What I mean by that in this example is multiply 24.3 times 21.5, then 36.9 times 15.6, 14.2 times 45.2. So let's do this. I'm going to type in a column header, data times data 2. And I could type in equals, and I'll get the cell reference from from the first data set, from cell B2, and then times, remember times is shift 8, and then the data value in cell D2, and I'm going to press enter. Now I can do the same thing again. I could say equals the data value in B3 times the data value in D3. Now, this would take a long time, especially if I have a large set of data values to which I want to multiply together. So we have a workaround for this, and I'm going to delete the second one that I just put down there just to show you this. And I'm going, after I typed in the first cell, the B2 times D2, I'm going to go back and just click on the cell. When you click on a cell, you can all see that the cell is highlighted with a dark green border around it. With that dark green border, the bottom right hand corner, there's a little teeny square. Now, take a look at my cursor. The cursor has a fat plus sign. And as I approach that bottom right hand corner of this cell, it turns into a thin plus sign. Once that happens, I press down on the mouse and I hold it down, and I do what I call dragging and dropping the formula. So I'm holding the mouse button down, and now I'm going to drag and drop down to the last one, and there we go. It automatically fills in these other cells, so I didn't have to type each one if I am using the exact same formula. Now, let's take a look at this very carefully. I typed in the first one. First one automatically multiplied B2 times D2. Let's go to the second one. And that was filled in for us, and it says now B3 times D3. In other words, it updated as I dragged and dropped the formula down. Similarly, if I go down to cell F6, you'll see that shows B6 times D6. It updates each cell as I go down. You can also do things like dragging and dropping a function across, but in this case it doesn't make any sense to do it because we're not multiplying stuff in that way. Since each cell updated when I dragged and dropped down, I call that dynamic cell referencing. In other words, as you drag and drop down, the cell will automatically update to the next values. Sometimes we don't want that to happen. For example, if I wanted to multiply every value in a data set by the number 10, I could put the number 10 in a cell, and then I can say, all right, well, I want to always reference that number 10. The word for that we use in science and mathematics is static. In other words, it will always be static. It'll always be the same number. Now, before I start doing this, I'm going to show you how to add a column. To add a column to the left, I'm going to click on the letter of the column. I'm going to right mouse click on that letter and then click on Insert, and then I've added another column. And let's do that again. You can also do that same thing for rows. For example, if I wanted to put another row above row 14, well, really row 14 will then become row 15, and then it'll put one above it if I just right mouse click and insert. Moving right along, I am going to type in a multiplier that I want to always use to multiply by each value in the data set. First, I'm going to type in a label. And let's see, I'm going to send that to the right of that cell, make it bold. And let's see, I'll just pick a number, 11.32. Let's say I wanted to multiply 11.32 times each value in data set 1. So I'm going to just put this in column J, and I'm going to say multiplier times data. And I think that labeling your columns and labeling your constant values is an important thing to do, so you can always keep track of that. Okay. And let me just show you what happens if we do this the wrong way. I'm going to type in equals my multiplier times, remember that's Shift 8, the data value, and press enter. Now if I go and click back on the cell, you'll see it says B2 times D2. That's what I wanted to do. Here's B2, here's D2. Sounds like a Star Wars reference. Ba-dum-bum. So, watch what happens when I do my drag and drop function thing. Fat plus sign, going down to the bottom right, thin plus sign. I'm going to drag and drop down, and everything works out to be 0. Let's see what happened. So the first one, we already know that works. It's B2 times D2. But the second one did B3 times D3, but D3, there's nothing there. In a case like this, it just counts that as a 0. And on the next one, it says B4 times D4. Again, there's nothing there. So I just counted that as 0. So here's how we work around that. I am going to delete everything. And I'm going to type in the first one again. Equals my multiplier times the data value. I want this multiplier to always come from this B2 right here, to always come from B2. That means I want it to be static. So what I do is I go between the equal sign and the letter of the column, and I put a $sign. Now, $sign looks like the letter S. So that's how I always know, because S, static cell reference. But I also have to go between the letter of the column and the number for the row, and I put another $sign there as well. And then I click enter. Now you see it came up with the exact same number as before, even though I put the $signs in front of the letter and the number. But now let's see what happens when I drag and drop that function. I have a fat plus sign. I'm going to go over lower right hand corner and thin plus sign, press on the mouse button, drag and drop down, and there we go. So let's see if that worked. Okay, this one, of course, because we typed it in. Now this one, if you take a look over here, we still have B with a $sign in front of it, 2 with a $sign in front of it, but now times D3. Here I have B2 times D4. Here I have B2 times D5, and so on and so on. Therefore, when you put the $sign in front of it, it keeps that cell as always being that cell. An advantage to this is because in this problem, you might want to have that multiplier as 11.32. And again, that's just an arbitrary number. In another one, you might want to have it multiplied by the number 10. So there we go, the number 10. I'm going to press enter. And when I press enter, watch what happens to this column right here. It changes all of the numbers just from changing this one number right here, the multiplier number. So that's what we call a static cell reference. Remember, whenever we want each cell to update, we're going to multiply, D2 in this case now times F2, D3 times F3, like we have here, D2 times F2, D3 times F3, and so on and so on. That's called a dynamic cell reference. At least that's what I call it. Microsoft calls it something different. When I always want to take the same cell and always have it stay as that cell, then I put the $signs just before the one I want to remain static. This concludes this lesson. In the next lesson, what we're going to learn are how to determine 4 measures of center, and then our measures of variance, also known as the measures of dispersion. Have a great day.